Look to see.
Hello? Hello? Are we live?
Hello.
Is it live? Am
I
I
don't
live?
know.
It says we're
Where's
waiting.
the?
It's not up
Refresh.
Oh, hold
on
on.
my.
It's is it youtube.com/TenFlicks?
It says that we're here.
Nope.
No,
I refreshed it. It's not
it
seeing
says
us.
waiting.
Yeah.
I can see us doing stuff. I'm so confused. Sorry. Okay. Now once that catches up, everything should be good. We should be golden. Damn it. Okay. Connection excellent. Should be live. People should see me. Hello. Hi. So today we're discussing the death penalty. In the interest of full disclosure, I 100% just went through this long intro. It was probably sounded better than whatever I'm going to get out now. We're discussing the death penalty. There's a lot of questions around it. I think that it's something like 22 states have it currently banned in the United States. So I think that for the panelists here, I'm going to put the onus on them to answer a few questions regarding the topic. I want to know whether or not it should be outright abolished. If not, why? And kind of the general vibe from everybody in the room. Everybody's going to get a 3-minute opening to sort of explain their position. And if you come a little under, it's fine. But one reason is that so nobody starts losing their shit before like that 10-minute marker on YouTube, and I won't get demonetized in my first stream ever. The questions will go sort of in a relatively loose category. I like the idea of letting you guys sort of like flow in the conversation as much as possible, but where I need to, I'll come in with a more hard question if I feel like people are sort of like dodging or ducking, and give everybody the opportunity to answer that. But for the most part, I think everybody here should be pretty respectful. So we'll start with Eggusan if you want to start, and then we'll just go like egg, chicken, feathery, wick.
Okay. Yeah. My name is Eggusan. I'm Eggusan pretty much everywhere. I am pro death penalty. I think it's very pragmatic. I think it's a good way to not waste money re-incarcerating and reconvicting people who are already clearly awful. I think it's also particularly good for a communal sense of justice for people. I think if your society would largely kill you as a response to you engaging in an act, it's very likely that that death is actually the thing they want, right? So I think it only makes sense to sort of give people that sense of justice, and to just end the people who do things that are far too egregious to be able to be reintegrated into society. Society would never accept those people back. So there's no point in prolonging that person's death at that point. That's it.
Okay. Chicken.
Hi, I'm KamikazeChicken. Look, today we'll be discussing the death penalty. It's a policy and practice that many promise will provide a myriad of benefits to society. However, in practice, these benefits don't really appear to materialize. I'm going to discuss, I suppose, my position on what justice should look like in a modern society. I think that we should prioritize to the exclusion of retribution, both the safety of citizens who are innocent in society from those who would do harm to them, and rehabilitation of those who are likely to be able to re-enter society. Any policy implementation, in my mind, should also be non-discriminatory and should never discriminate effectively on the basis of immutable characteristics, including but not limited to race, gender, and sex. Furthermore, any policy implementation must be both cost-effective and be supported by the broader academic literature. The death penalty, unfortunately, fails on all of these counts. I'm sure we will have time to address a whole myriad of points with regards to deterrence, but I just have, I suppose, one quote that I do want to be present in everyone's mind as we further this discussion. The National Research Council in 2012 did a study on the effectiveness of the death penalty as a deterrent effect, in which they found the research to date on the effect of capital punishment on homicide is not informative about whether capital punishment decreases, increases, or has no effect on homicide rates. We absolutely need to make sure that we are correct effect in implementing these policies that have far and wide-reaching effects, negative effects, on both the families of victims and also the families of those who perpetrate crimes. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Feathery.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Feathery, and I'll be debating the pro side of the death penalty. The death penalty is a sensitive topic as where our country is still divided on its purpose, effectiveness, and justifications. And today I'll hopefully be able to talk about all these three things with you and more. But as a starting place, this is perfect. I'm a pro death penalty because I believe there are people in this world so heinous, so evil, that we would be doing the world a disservice by not putting them to death. Some examples of this would be Ted Bundy, most notably, but less notably, you have characters like Jeffrey Lee Griffin, who on July 23rd of 1978 disposed of a partially nude body over 20-year-old waitress Sylvia Mendoza, who was found dumped in a trash bin, with a subsequent autopsy determining that she had been stabbed a total of 49 times. Oh, and this was only one of his three victims. I believe this man meets the bar of evil and heinous. George Jefferson Hassel, who killed his wife and 8 children, ranging in between ages of 1 and 21 years old. He also killed his wife and 3 stepchildren in an earlier marriage, earlier in his life. Every name I'm telling you are people that America successfully sentenced to death, just to keep in mind. And the last one takes a particularly interesting place for me. His name is Robert Charles Gleason, who was sentenced to death and executed in Virginia for 2 separate murders of his 2 cellmates. Gleason, who was already serving a life sentence for another murder, was an execution volunteer who vowed to continue killing in prison if he was not put to death. The less notable serial killers are not widely known. In fact, I would take the chance and say that they've been effectively wiped out of the collective's consciousness, lending them no more attention or power. And more particularly, the last noted serial killer, like mentioned, goes to show that simply placing these individuals in jail will not stop the destruction they reap onto the world. And I look forward to talking a little bit more about a couple of these topics in regards to why I believe the most heinous and evil people in the world should be sentenced to death.
Awesome. Thank you. And then last but not least, Wick.
Okay. So I want to tell you the story about 2 individuals. Joseph Odell. He was convicted of rape and murder in Virginia in 1986. And in 1997, he was eventually executed for that crime. Turns out he didn't do it. New blood DNA evidence has thrown considerable doubt on the murder and rape conviction of Odell, right? And as we have gotten more and more technologically advancements, we have such stories where we find people who have been killed, executed by the state for a heinous crime that they were convicted of. It turns out that later information is released and they did not do it. Another example, Larry Griffin, Missouri, convicted 1981 and executed in 1995. Perhaps one of the most clearest cut cases of this happening. He was convicted for his role, supposed alleged role in a drive-by shooting. However, after his execution, a lot of evidence came to light showing it probably wasn't him that was there and doing it. Let me give you another example. Carlos de Luna, Texas, convicted in 1983 and executed in 1989. Again, same thing. Everyone thought he did it. He was convicted of the crime of killing another person. But guess what? Turns out later on they found out that the guy who actually did it looked almost exactly like him. They killed the wrong, and he had the same name. Weirdly, they killed the wrong Carlos. This keeps happening. We have countless examples of this. Since 1976, there's been 1,588 executions. I'm not sure if that's worldwide or just in the United States, so forgive me with that. But we have no way of knowing how many of these deaths were justified and how not. And this is the problem with it. Look, I'll see to my opponents tonight that there are some people who need to be removed from society permanently. However, due to the there's no take backsies when you kill someone. You can't bring them back to life. There is no way to rectify any wrongs done in or mistakes made during the prosecution process. It's a permanent thing in a very real way. So life in prison would be the go-to. Just from a moral standpoint, the death penalty is abhorrent. How many more innocents might we kill if we keep this up? I don't know. That's my statement. So there you go.
Okay, cool. I think that that transitions pretty well into one of the questions I have jotted down here, and I'll go I'll let kind of whoever wants to jump on this first, but I guess it'll be the onus will be on the anti-death penalty people here. Did everything go? There we go. I think that one of the things that we discuss whenever we have this conversation is whether or not, like, which one of these things is even the worst punishment to begin with. Do you think that the most heinous members of society, it would actually be a more harsh punishment to keep them in jail for life versus taking them out early, effectively? And I guess more specifically to the people that are anti, do you think that these prisoners can still add value to society despite being incarcerated? So I would say that they are like removed from society. They're in prison for life. Do you think that they're sort of done as far as value goes, or do you think that they can still add something? And I guess I'll go to Chicken first on that.
Okay, so what's important to recognize is that there's not a significant difference in the mind of someone who's about to commit a crime between life in prison without the possibility of parole and death. It tends to be the case that for many people who are going to do some of these particularly heinous crimes, as has been pointed out earlier by Featherykascade, that they actually prefer the death penalty as opposed to, say, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. It gives them an opportunity to not only get their name in the headlines and be talked about and be remembered, but also to rub the sand in the wound of all of their victims. Timothy McVeigh is a really interesting example of this. He goes up to get executed. He smirks at all of his victims and all the victims' families, and he makes a final statement that effectively, again, rubs sand in the wound. So something that we need to recognize is it's not clear whether or not life without the possibility of parole or the death penalty is seen as better or worse in the minds of a lot of the people who are doing these acts. When it comes to the capacity of people to be able to do good behind prison bars, I think we have seen examples of this. But I do think that their ability to contribute to society is limited. At the very least, they can do in-prison work, this sort of stuff that does help offset the costs of keeping them incarcerated.
Okay. And then Wick, would you more or less agree, or where do you feel like do you feel like is any part of your argumentation in the anti-death penalty side, is it born out of not only just it would probably be more morally correct, but it actually would probably be more punitive? And then the same question, do you feel as though prisoners can still add value?
So when it comes to being more punitive, that's not something I take into account, right? Like, again, it's whether or not life in prison is worse than the death penalty from the point of view or the perspective of someone who has actually committed the crime, is actually guilty of what they did. Uh, I don't care which they think is better or worse, to be honest with you. When it comes down to it, there is a moral stain put upon the people who are executing these alleged perpetrators. It is a moral stain on our society. And the risk of executing an innocent man far outweighs, I think, any kind of punitive nature of what we would want to do to those who have done these horrible things. So yeah, frankly, I don't give a shit. As for adding a value to the society, I do believe in rehabilitative justice. I think that in certain cases, right, they might be used as examples, like perhaps could tell their story. This is how I got here. Please don't repeat my mistakes. That's possible. But I think that, again, we want to just remove them from society entirely. Whether or not they add value to it is irrelevant to my argument. Again, once again, just to reiterate, the onus here, or the gravity of what I'm trying to argue tonight, is that by having the death penalty, the risks of killing an innocent man or innocent woman, and just the moral kind of weight of that as a policy, it's bad for society and culture as a whole. That's it.
Okay. And then obviously I feel like the pro death penalty side, it's sort of baked in that like the opinion of value is one that is lost for you once they've committed something heinous enough, given that you're sort of in favor of them, being removed altogether. Is that fair to assume?
Um, yeah, I mean, once you start talking about some of the most heinous criminals there are,
Mm.
um, and there's a bunch of them that we can talk about. Countless serial killers that we've caught in throughout the years, and especially since we've reinstated the death penalty, that absolutely 100% could never add value to our society ever again. These are people that are beyond saving. These are people that are beyond our help, because their sole purpose in this world was to reap destruction. I would argue that uh, our death penalty standards are not strict enough. I think instead of instead of kind of being instead of it being as open it as it is in terms of who gets applied for the death penalty or not, I think we should actually make it more strict in terms of how evil it is instead of abolishing it altogether, pretty much. I think there's a line in everyone that once that's crossed, the retribution is the only fair and equal punishment that could fit the crime. And we make punishments that fit the crime. We don't make uh, crimes that fit punishment. I
Can
mean,
I
sorry, go ahead.
can I interrogate that? I just don't know your
Yeah.
format.
Yeah. Feel free.
Okay. Sure, sure. So retribution. Why do you think that that's the most, or at least, why are we using retribution as the lens with which we're looking through this? What
Because
value does retribution add, in your opinion?
the value of retribution is that it's the morally opposing opposite force to correct the moral wrong done, right? So the moral wrong done was, like, let's say, an act of egregious, for example, a Ted Bundy, right? I use Ted Bundy because most of the viewers here are probably most familiar with him. Ted Bundy was obviously put to death, right? I don't believe that there was any universe whatsoever where Ted Bundy was ever going to be reformed. And I don't believe that there is any possibility that, um, given a life in prison, he wouldn't be able to do just that, like you guys were mentioning, rubbing salt in the wounds of their victims. They'd have a lifetime of opportunities to
Did
right.
killing him bring back any of the victims?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. So even like keeping him in prison, keeping him alive, having him work, and using the wages he makes while working to give to the families of his victims, that seems much more like justice to me than simply removing him. In fact, by killing him, you remove the ability for the family to get any kind of compensation or closure. And in fact, it's more like a you want to, and I'm not. Please don't take this the wrong way. I'm not. This isn't you particularly, right? But
Hmm.
society, right?
Yeah.
Society looks and says, we want to hurt this guy who hurt someone else, but it does nothing for the victims. And in fact, in many cases, right, it can further traumatize the victims, right, who are just having to see more death. So again, like we can think of alternatives than simply having them sit in prison. Again, garnishing their wages and making them work for so many hours a day. I think that's a much more fitting. If we care about the victims here, and I think we should, what would be your argument against that?
So my argument against that would be Robert Charles Gleason, who, when he was already sentenced to life in prison, executed two other cellmates, um, and continued to do what he was his basic only purpose in this world was to, in his belief, was to cause
No, sorry.
destruction.
I do disagree. So I don't think anyone's born to cause destruction. You said that these people are sort of their sole purpose is just to reap destruction. It doesn't seem like he murdered these people necessarily for the purposes of just murdering these people. You said that he murdered these people. He said he would continue murdering until he was given the death penalty. It seems he was seeking the death penalty. The purpose of killing those people may very well have been to get the death penalty, so he could get
Yeah.
in the media, so he could go and do all of these things that are positively associated with the death penalty. The example that you gave of Ted Bundy, we saw he had a myriad of interviews before his death penalty, and he used them to his own ends.
Yeah,
This
but
was
he would
something
have had
that
that myriad of
he
interviews before, even
relished
if
it.
he was the life in prison. He would have had those myriad of interviews, even if he was in life in prison. That the
Isn't
death
that
penalty.
another societal good though? Getting the perspective of these monsters, and I won't disagree with you that they're monsters. I take a little bit of a different tack than my ally here. I would agree that a lot of them. I don't think they were born that way, but I think society can create a person that way, right? Like
So
when
you
they have
seek to
something
inspire the
transcendent.
monsters.
Not inspire, but act as a cautionary tale, right?
Oh, a
So people
cautionary
can
tale.
see like
Right.
what is it that
But
brought
why
this
wouldn't they
person
want to
to
get
this
on TV
place.
too?
They might, but I'm talking about for
Oh.
society in general. So, like, as we study the lives and we study the horrific or perpetrators of horrific crimes, we can glean insights into what makes them how they are. And by keeping them alive, studying them, um, having them go to therapy and things like that, not for the purpose of rehabilitation, but for the purpose of finding out why is it that these people are the way they are, and then using that going forward to make sure that there are less of those people in the world by
Yeah, we
nipping it in
tried
the bud,
lobotomy.
right?
We tried lobotomy. We kind of turned away from that,
Well,
right?
what? No,
So
I'm not talking about lobotomy. So, for example, if you take a serial killer and you find out, and again, this is a hypothetical, you find
mhm.
out that they were something terrible happened to them in their teenage years, right? And because of these other factors and how they responded to it, it set them on the path that made them the serial killer. Then you know, as a society, as a culture, hey, these things are especially dangerous, and you can take measures to hopefully mitigate that at least.
I
Yes?
would say that we already
We've been
know
doing that for at least 2,500 years.
Yeah, I would say that we already know those societal dangers that are markers for creating dangerous people, right? Neglect, you know, uninvolvement, severe punishment, sexual abuse in the household.
Yeah,
These are
but
all
as
common.
technology advances with the advent of social media, for example, scientists and therapists and psychologists are learning how all these things that you're right that we've known for a while, right? How they manifest differently in these different spaces, and I guarantee you, technology is going to continue to advance, and I think it would be helpful as we go to see how these new technologies um, change the context of some of these things.
I
I think it's
guarantee
just
you we'll find out there is absolutely no single or material motivator to the actions of most horrendous people. To most people who have a desire to go out and do things like rape and murder and molest children, they do not and will not be stopped by early interventions. They, by genetic proclivity and material, uh, if you will, motivation, it's just a catalyst for what they would always have done.
And I mean, I guess just to be clear though, do you, if you're of the opinion that like X and Y wouldn't stop them, do you think you think that the death penalty serves as like a viable deterrent for that, or is it sort of just a catch-all at the end of that funnel?
It can be both. I think it would be a deterrent to the people who would do things like, well, for instance, right, we wouldn't have a scenario where someone murders somebody, gets to live, then realizes, well, I really don't want to live in prison and have them garnish my wages and give back anything to them. So I need to kill as much as possible till they concede that the only way out for me, the only way out for them, is to get rid of me. There's a really popular case, right, that I've looked into in relation to this, right?
Mhm.
Are you guys familiar with who um, Clarnell Kemper is?
can't
No.
say I am. No.
Okay, well, he's one of the most famous murderers
Sorry,
ever.
do you mean Edward Kemper,
Is his
otherwise known
name
as,
Edward?
or
No, I thought his name was Clarnell. Clarnell?
are we talking about the very tall man who killed a bunch of women?
Very tall man who not only killed a
Yeah,
bunch
yeah,
of women, but
Incredibly intelligent.
Ed
when he was
Kemper.
15,
Edward
130
Kemper.
IQ.
Yeah.
Is his first name Edward? I thought it was Clarnell. Anyway,
It
it
could
doesn't
be,
matter.
yeah.
You would
Clarnell
have
might be his
killed
Anyway.
middle
some
name.
dude named with the same last name. He would have been dead.
Oh,
It'd have been
Anyway.
gone.
Sorry,
Look at
Edmund
this.
Anyway,
You can't get it
regardless,
right in a
regardless.
debate panel, right? Like,
Regardless, the
oh.
point is this, right? Is that when he was 15 years old, he killed both of his grandparents. Okay, he murdered them both with a knife. Um, he then in court was declared to have schizophrenia of some kind, and was announced to be mentally deficient. Okay, so he served, I think it was 8 or 9 years for those two murders in prison. When he got out, he was out for, I believe, about 11 or 12 years. And in that time, he then proceeded to murder 8 other young women through multiple means. Um, but at the time of his
Would you have
release,
killed him? And when he did this when he was 15, would you have
what's that?
executed him then? At
Would
15,
I
would you have
have?
executed?
Would
Well,
I
would
have?
you have had the state do it? If
No,
you
no.
were
If
king
given
of
the
the world
chance, I would have. Sure.
at 15. So
If I had found
15-year-old
him
boy.
having murdered his two grandparents, I would have
Okay,
killed him on the spot.
Yeah.
fair enough.
So even
I gotta
even if
disagree with my debate partner
even
there
if
as
we
well.
sorry, if you want to go ahead, but
No,
even if
go
we
ahead.
agree with Edmund Kemper should not have been released from prison, that doesn't mean that we ought to have killed him. He might have lost the right to live, but that doesn't mean we ought
Uh,
to have killed him. We must consider all of the other
oh,
externalities.
not
There's
even
this
my point yet.
insistence. There's this insistence that this has a deterrent effect, but in the case of Edmund Kemper, fueled by mental illness, a person who turned himself in, this guy probably wouldn't have been deterred by any change in the actual
Absolutely.
punishment here, going
Yep.
from specifically from life in prison
You're absolutely
to
right.
being killed.
You're absolutely right. And if we
And
had
so
killed
we
him, we would
must
have
look.
saved the
We must
lives of
look.
8 young women.
So we must look. So in this case, it should have been the case that he should have been put in prison, life without the possibility of parole, something along these lines. It should not have been the case that he was released, right? But these are this is fine.
So you
We
don't
don't
believe
have
in
to
the
accept that he
ideas of
must have been
mental
killed here,
deficiency?
because when we institute the death penalty, it comes with a myriad of other costs to society.
Yeah,
What cost
so
would there have been aside from 8
Well,
women being alive?
This is
firstly,
the
the 8
hold
women.
on. This is the thing,
Sorry, you
right?
go.
We can look at incidences, right, where again, Pro should have never been released. We know that
hmm
now. But we don't have a crystal ball. We can't see into the future. And so when we're crafting policies for what we're going to do going forward in the future, we don't know, neither you nor I, how many of those people that you want to execute on the spot actually did the crime. And that's the danger here, is how many innocents have we killed, right? That did not deserve to die. Now I'm with you. I'm with you. He shouldn't have been released. We could have more stringent policies on how not to release dangerous convicted felons, right, into society again. Fair enough. But here's the thing: we can correct that mistake. What we cannot correct is when we put to death an innocent young 15-year-old boy who happens to be someone you think killed someone, but oops, oopsie whoopsie, turns out he just had he had the same last name but a different first name, right? Like this is a problem. Anyway, go
I'll
ahead.
go ahead and chime in here
Yeah.
and say that I would disagree with you. I would believe that any type of long-term punishment is irreparable damage done to a person. It's you cannot go back and 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 give them back the time. So if you have someone who's locked away for 40 years on life with no parole, 40, 50 years down the line, they find out they're innocent. Their life is still over. You've
No, it's not.
effectively
They have however much life that they have left. Like
Yeah, if
pros
they
are
were
living to
30 years
90
old,
these
if
days.
they were 30 years old and they spend 50 years in jail and now you find out that they're
Mm.
innocent, they're 80 years old, then now they have nothing. They have no life. You've effectively killed that person.
But this
And
perfectly demonstrates, by the way, why we shouldn't just jump to the death penalty. Oftentimes, if you tell someone that they're going to lose the next 20, 30 years of their life as a result of doing a crime, that's going to be the equivalent in their brain of a death penalty. When it comes down to it, pulling up the severity of a punishment doesn't really do that deterrent effect
yeah,
that you want. It's actually the certainty or the perceived certainty of committing a crime that actually has that deterrent effect.
yeah, and you keep noting that the deterrence factor doesn't work, and I would argue that like I said, that we don't just do this based off on a deterrence factor. It may be one factor in it, right? Because you have to understand that there are killers that go on the stand and they fear the death penalty, right? There are people who obviously fear death. There's obviously really heinous people who still don't want to die, and that's going to be true in a lot of different cases, right? So, I mean, it's not just a deterrence factor that I'm interested in. It's also whether or not that, like I said, we have an obligation to society to remove, we said monsters before, but a more accurate description may be a parasite, something that, infects the host body of a society and only intends to reap destruction. You guys talk about rehabilitation, but I would point to argue that there are some people who cannot be rehabilitated, which would lend credence to my let's not get rid of the death penalty, but let's make it more strict, right? And this is not state sanctioned. This is sanctioned by a jury of your peers. A jury of your peers is who sends you to the death penalty. They're the ones who decide whether or not you get the death penalty or the life sentence. A judge may overrule their decision, but most of the times a judge goes with the decision of the jury. Um,
So part of the issue with your metaphor that you're using here, when it comes to parasites, I believe was the term that you used.
mhm.
When we're doing medicine, if we're treating this as a medicine thing, we have to make sure that the treatment isn't worse than the actual disease itself. And when it comes down to it, the cost of the death penalty does cost more than keeping these people alive for the rest of their lives. It's incredibly expensive. If we're talking about the parasitic model that's happening here, really, it's going to be the death penalty structure that doesn't really give any clear benefits and in fact harms society.
And I just want to point out on that sentencing thing, that's not always the case. For example, in the Missouri law, a judge may impose a death sentence when the jury deadlocks in the penalty phase, right? It's not always, right, the case where it's
and I noted
decided by
that.
a jury of the phase.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
noted that a judge may decide in some of the cases, but it's more likely than not that a jury will decide whether or not you go to the death
And
sentence.
that, again, more likely than not. I don't want there to be any chance, right, at all of these things. And again, I agree with you that we just need to remove some people from society permanently. But the problem is, once again, we have to recognize our system is not perfect. It will never be perfect. There will be mistakes. And so, unless we have a way to compensate the victims of our mistakes, um, I can't
So,
go along with this. So, and just let me finish right quick. Again, in the case where someone's in prison for 20, 30, 40 years, there is a system we have in place, and you can argue it's not enough or it's different, where we compensate that person. They get millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? It depends on the state. Again, when you kill them, you can't compensate them. You can't do it.
no,
There's no fix.
I think looking at it monetarily is the wrong way to do it. I don't think this is a monetary issue. I don't think that we should be talking about this because we think it costs too much to the taxpayer. Because I know a lot of people, and no one ever talks about the death sentence taxes making our taxes higher, right? It's not affecting the average day citizen.
Well,
And
again, just to cut you off here, like the monetary issue wasn't the thing. I was just noting an example of compensation we give. That's all.
Correct. No, but
Yeah.
I also don't believe that compensation in terms of giving money from the perpetrator to the victim, like there's some type of monetary value to the nature of the crime that happened, right? Like
Sorry,
you owe.
in the case that Wick was talking about, sorry, the perpetrator in that you're referring to would be the state who has unjustly imprisoned or executed someone who is actually innocent, so the false positive in the judicial
Yeah,
system.
he's
So what
saying.
Wick
Oh,
was
I thought you were
specifically saying was, imagine there's someone who's been locked up for 10 years. He's lost the best 10 years of his life when he's younger. It turns out he was innocent. We can actually do something to help at least in part rectify this wrong.
yeah.
However, if he had just been put to death, there would be no recourse.
There you go. That's why I have my buddy here, right? He's
Oh,
one of the bird boys. Okay.
I thought you were mentioning
Yeah,
like
that's it.
the prisoner working and like
No, no,
garnishing
no,
their
no.
wages and
Sorry,
bringing that back into the picture again.
my
Okay,
bad.
so my
There you go.
apologies. That was
All
me.
good.
I got those two mixed up. Okay.
No, you're okay, mate.
But yeah, I mean, still, yes, you can do that, but there was still irreparable damage done. Money is not going to replace the years that they lost. It's
Hmm.
not an equal
I agree.
value exchange. And furthermore, I would even argue that if you're anti-death penalty, you're also anti-life with no parole. Because it comes to an almost cruel and unusual
No, I
punishment
disagree.
where you because a lot of these people who are in maximum security, life with no parole, get 23
Hmm.
hours inside a cell and 1 hour outside of their cell.
So
These are
when we're
people who
talking
have
about,
no contact with
uh,
human beings, pretty much. These are people who will
Yeah,
never
I don't
see.
care about the cruelty.
No.
right? In either
Oh,
case,
okay, but
I just don't.
but you have to understand the
So-
cruelty is an important part in our judicial system. In
Yeah,
fact,
but
we
not
cannot
in my
commit.
argument.
I understand.
just
but
just
in our
to be
judicial
clear as
system,
well,
since we're talking about
just
the
to be clear
judicial
as well for everyone who's listening, when we say life without the possibility of parole, that doesn't mean without the possibility of being proven innocent and then eventually being freed, right? That's not what it's about. It's a statement that at this point there's no way that this person could possibly be rehabilitated. There's no safe way of them ever being able to re-enter society. That's the statement that's being made. It's not stating they will never be out of prison, because in the case where they have been proven innocent, they absolutely should be allowed out of prison. This is one of the fundamental issues with the American system at the moment. There are many people who are on death row who will be exonerated from death row, not necessarily just because they were innocent, but just because someone didn't cross the dot the i's and cross the t's. And in fact, it is not clear in the American system that if someone does have evidence that they are innocent, that crops up after trial, that they would be prevented from being killed. Unfortunately, it is the case that it is much more likely you're going to be let off even if you don't have any positive evidence to suggest that you're innocent, then if you do have that positive evidence, given it's primarily on the basis of error in process, that you tend to be let off. It's a strange system.
Okay, so I do want to let Egg chime in, and I guess because it seems like we've kind of danced around this, and it feels as though I think Feathery more or less gave an answer there. But to Egg, and then I'll also allow the antis to chime in. Is the death penalty in and of itself financially viable, and is the cost being higher for imprisoning somebody for life without a death penalty? Is this something that you just simply do not care about, and if not, why?
I think there are two aspects to this. I think the death penalty, first of all, is generally widely considered to be a very just sentence for certain heinous crimes. And I think as well, it is actually quite economical to execute somebody compared to keeping them in prison for 40, 50 years. I believe the price per prisoner in the United States is like $32,000 or $33,000 a year, and someone who is serving a life sentence, I believe, bumps it up a couple more grand to about like $40,000 a year, which is pretty serious. A pretty serious amount of money per year when you start to think about that 40, 50 years. Now they may be able to do things in prison to earn back some money or you know acquire some so we can harvest a little bit of their labor. But the problem is to be honest with you, most of the most heinous criminals in history, at least especially U.S. history, are not highly educated human beings. They are not human beings who we would generally consider to be producers of any particularly valuable goods. And so the only thing that we could potentially extract from them is their time. And generally speaking, the wage at which we pay inmates in the United States is the federal minimum wage. That does not equate anywhere near what it may cost to be housing them for 40 or 50 years. It may be something, but it isn't nowhere near recouping.
So you assert this, but when it comes down to it, the evidence shows that depending on the state, the cost over the lifetime of a prisoner for executing versus keeping alive in prison is going to be somewhere between $500,000 to $1 million more to execute them, just because of the way that all of these systems have to be implemented to make sure that we're not murdering innocent people.
Correct. The appeal process.
That may be what you
There's,
assert, but I would not assert such a thing. The
but it's
thing
the
does
case.
not have to
The
be
people who are
this
watching
way.
can just Google this. This is very
You're right. They can
Googleable.
Google how things work now. Yeah, you have about a 10-year. You have about a 10-year
Wait, so are you
appeal process
advocating
minimum.
for making it cheaper, basically, to kill people by taking away some of those protections we have?
8 ounces of lead is not very expensive.
Okay, so what the
Jesus.
expense of this is the processes that are put in place to ensure that we don't take that 8 ounces of lead and put it in a person who did not kill anyone, right, and did not deserve death.
Is it 10 years?
into
Is
their
that the
head.
right time? 10 years
Um,
is the right time.
I don't know the exact amount of time that it takes. But the
What for
process
you is the right time?
expensive.
How much is the right amount of time to prove yourself
It would be the
innocent
right
of a
amount of
crime like
time
that?
to ascertain that this is someone who, beyond any shadow of a doubt, is
No, hold
actually
on.
guilty.
The question's silly because I don't believe in the death penalty. I
But-
think I'm here against the death penalty. I don't care, right? Like I'm not.
Oh.
I'm looking also.
So you have no standard for your own question.
I am using your assertion, your position, and interrogating it because you are advocating for
If
a
you want
world-
my answer, I can answer the question
Yes,
very simply.
yeah, just
I think
answer the
about 6
question.
months. About 6 months.
Okay, so
That's
6
enough time
months
for
of
you to
investigation.
figure out whether or not you're innocent or guilty entirely.
So-
That is after sentencing, right? So
Yes.
that's not the court, the initial
I
case,
get you.
right?
I get you. So to be clear, what you are advocating for is removing a lot of these protections, such as appeals processes, etc., in order to expedite the process and make it cheaper to kill people in the United States.
I mean, I think it's unnecessarily expensive as it is now. It's highly bloated.
Okay, so I just went through in my opening statement 2 cases. There's plenty more that we could go through
Mhm.
of incidents where even years after their death. So
Mhm.
we're not talking 6 months. We're not talking 6 years. We're talking years after their death. We
Mhm.
figured out, oopsie whoopsie, we made a mistake. And again, that in and of itself, I think, is argument enough to say we are not a perfect system. We do not have a perfect law and order kind of situation in America. So, and we're never going to get that. So we need to take that off the table. And we need to say, yeah, people need to be removed from society, but we could do that through life in prison. And I don't care if it costs more, frankly. But yeah, that's me.
Feathery, it seemed like
So
you
is
wanted
it-
to clarify there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't think it should be 6 months. I think there should be a lengthy appeal process that they're allowed to go through. I think it's the only thing that makes sense in a case like this, where you're talking about a punishment that's supposed to fit a crime this severe. Right? It's always something serious that we should take seriously, and there are people who are unjustly sentenced and get put in prison, and that we later find out to be innocent. I believe it's like 153 since 1973 or 158 or something, in the high hundreds out of the 1,500 executions that we've done since 1973. We should have an exceptionally small margin of error when it comes to this. And you talked about law and order. Yeah, we do live in a society of law and order, and our system is not perfect. That's why we always strive to better our laws and our government bodies. And this is exactly what we can do with the death penalty. We can strive.
Exactly. One of the ways to benefit our law and society is by getting rid of the death penalty. Exactly.
You're not even
no,
pro
no,
death
no, no.
penalty.
No, so I am pro death penalty. No,
No,
the
no,
benefit-
him. He said exactly to your point, which rests on the idea that you are instituting a death penalty.
correct. I
Well,
think we can.
what
I
what
think we
Wick was saying exactly to, just to be very, very clear, is he was saying exactly to the fact that our system is constantly improving. Something that we must recognize is as the system improves, we can actually show that more people who are innocent, who are these false positives, are going to be more, found innocent. And as we improve as a society, we're going to find more and more of these cases. There's no way for us to know how many people have been put to death who have not been proven yet to be innocent, who were innocent. So there might be
a complete
tragic,
immeasurable
false
number.
positive, and that's the thing, is because if you don't kill anybody, you're right, no one gets killed accidentally.
Yeah, but I guess I mean I think that
Yeah, thumbs up, right? That sounds good.
Yeah,
I-
but we kill
And we can save money
for
whilst
the
we do it.
moral good in the world, quite often. And you talk about wars, right, where we fight good moral wars, where
Well-
we attack
Hold
and
on.
kill.
yeah,
ahead.
I don't want to get too bogged down on that. I would rather just stay specifically onto the value that, or like, I guess, how much value do you add to the, even just the potential, and this will go to the both the pro people. How much do you weigh, I guess, the potential for innocent people to be sent to death row just outright? And then, assuming it seems like one of you is more in favor of the appeals process than the other. So Feathery, how much from that point do you weigh the potential for them to actually be executed? Because you're right, like time on death row, I think would impact people. And then the actual execution of a person who should have been exonerated. How much weight are you putting on that? I guess individually. We'll start with Egg.
Can you repeat the last part of the question real quick?
Well, so the last one, I feel like applies a little less to you because it's more focused on the appeals process. But it was, how much do you weigh the potential for innocent people to be sent to death row, and then from there, how much do you weigh the potential for them to be actually executed under the appeal system that we currently have?
I mean, I'm not familiar with the rates that the current process has in terms of whether or not the appeals process it would be considered a success, right?
Okay.
The problem therein lies also this false conception that the appeals process could even acquire a success, right? Because if the person has committed the crime, but they successfully appeal the sentencing, is this not what we would generally consider a miscarriage of justice? If there was a a sentencing of someone to, I don't know, anything random, even petty theft, right, of $1,000, whatever, um, and later another court were to come along and say, well, actually, no, we don't think this guy was ever guilty, and in fact, he doesn't have to give anybody anything back or anything like that. I don't see why you would do that. I don't know why you would hold another hearing, why you'd do another thing to annul another thing that has already been decided.
Well, I mean, I guess so. I'll allow Wick and Chicken the opportunity to maybe push back on that and provide the whys. Feathery, since you had a relatively separate position as it pertains to appeals, I'd like to ask you the same thing.
Which one would you like to go first?
You go ahead. So, how much do you weigh for innocent people to be sent to death row, and then how much do you weigh the potential for them to be actually executed from that point?
Oh, I weigh it very heavily. I think that it's super important to keep those sort of things in mind. Like I said, this is something that's an extremely serious punishment, just like the without parole would be an extremely serious punishment. Because just like I gave the example before, if you get sentenced to life with no parole and you're now 80 years old and they find you innocent, they have effectively already killed you. You have zero chance, no matter how much money they give you. You will never be able to do the things that you could do in your life. You've effectively taken that person's life away regardless, and they have to live now in an empty a world where they can no longer do the things that they should have been able to do, whether or not they were innocent. Right? I think we should. I think we should still keep it very heavily weighed, which is why I argue that we should make it more strict in terms of who we sentence to death. Um, and I firmly believe that we should still leave it in the right to the general public. I mean, this
Well,
is a jury of your peers, right? This is a jury of your peers, um, who determine whether or not you get sentenced to your death. In most cases, I'm not going to say that it happens in all cases, right? Um, but yes, in most cases, it is a jury of your peers.
can I ask you a question, Feathery?
Yeah.
In that scenario, right, where you mentioned this a few times, where a man is sentenced and found guilty, and then after 60, 50, some ungodly amount, they're let out, because they find that they're innocent. So in that case, right, would you think it would have been better for that person to have been killed? The
It's
innocent
not about
man.
better or worse.
Well, no, it is because we're actually trying to debate here whether or not the death penalty is better or worse than doing something like that where someone
It's
is found
never
innocent.
it's not good to lock up a innocent
I
person for
understand that
life, and
neither of
it's
these
not good
cases are
to
good, that
yes.
killing an
So
innocent man or locking up an innocent man, neither of these are good cases, but just because two things are very bad doesn't mean that they're equally bad. Or is that your assertion that they are?
um I would say that once you get to a certain degree of irreparable damage,
Better just
that
put a bullet in them like your buddy wants, right?
no, it's not as I don't think I'm as graphic as that.
No,
But
but that's basically what it is, right? Like
no, it's not.
you are
You can put a couple
advocating
in him.
here that
It's
You can put a
absolutely
couple.
not 8 ounces, you know.
after a certain amount of time, right? Then even if they're found innocent later, it doesn't matter because they should have been killed in the first place. It would have been better for them. That's what you're arguing here, as far
It's
as I
not
understand
about
it.
what's better for them because at the current time that we find them guilty, we are firmly, as a judicial system, in belief that this person is guilty of the crime they committed. Unless we lose all faith in our judicial system and their ability to qualify cases and judge cases, then we have to go with the you know morality compass of our judicial
Oh,
system.
part of that judicial system is recognizing that we get it wrong and having systems in place to correct those wrongs that we do. Like
Correct.
this
Appeal
is a current
processes.
thing.
That's why we have the
Appeal
appeals
processes,
process.
but not only that, but again, when someone is found innocent years after, we have compensation policies and other things where we try, and I agree with you, it's not enough, but we try to rectify. What I am advocating for here tonight, dear viewer, dear 10, dear opponents here, is that we get rid of the death penalty. We do not need it anymore. All those dangers that you mentioned, right? We can use other methods that are not permanent to mitigate those dangers. And in the system that you agree is a moral compass as a society, our society's moral compass is deciding more and more to get rid of the death penalty because more and more we recognize that is an abhorrent practice. That's my thoughts.
Chicken, did you have anything you wanted to add to the end of that?
Yeah, I primarily agree with Wick.
Of course you
I
do.
just think something that's really, really sad is that there's sort of this nihilistic sort of perspective, definitely being furthered by Eggusan and not necessarily so much by Feathery, that we just don't know what a success is in the justice system. The success of the justice system is insofar as it serves the public. When we're measuring the success of a case, is did the case get it right? There are going to be some cases where there is a conviction, but the person's actually innocent. This is a failure. It is also a failure if we find someone innocent who is guilty. But we do know what successes and failures look like in the justice system. It's silly to suggest otherwise.
We are actually debating one very simple question, which is this. Is it better in the pursuit of justice for a man who is guilty to go free, or is it better in the pursuit of justice for
No,
one innocent man to give up his life for justice?
no, because they're not giving up their life for justice. What they're giving up is for
Being
some
taken from
insatiable
them.
bloodlust you seem to have, which is very strange to me.
I don't share that insatiable
I'd give up
bloodlust.
my life
I'm
for
not
justice. Every
saying.
police officer in this country gives up his life for justice, or at least, at the
Well,
very least,
hold on. No,
gives
police
himself an
officers
opportunity on
volunteer.
a daily basis to give up his life for justice.
Wait, police officers volunteer. They voluntarily put themselves and agree
Absolutely
to be
do.
compensated for the risk that they might one day pay the ultimate
Uh-huh.
price. That's true. Someone who is found guilty, right, falsely of a charge which leads to them being killed did not volunteer at all. They did not put their lives on the line by any sort of voluntary measure. It was taken from them. They did not give it up. It was taken from them. And the act of us taking from an innocent man is far worse, in my opinion, than on occasion having someone get away with it. That is my contention here.
So where I would step in is that, and I've noted this a couple times, that we should just be more strict about who we sentence to death, and that would solve a lot of the issues, right? A lot of the people that I talked about in the beginning are people that, without a shadow of a doubt, were guilty of their crimes. They were proven guilty. There was evidence of their guilt, and testimony of their guilt. So these are people that were absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, guilty. These are the representatives that I would put to the case for the death penalty, right? Why do I say that? Well, the death penalty may not be better or worse. It may not be um, uh, worse than locking somebody in a cell and giving taking away all their rights, taking away all technology, taking away human contact, locking them in a cell for 23 hours a day and only letting them out for 1 hour a day, right? It may not, depending on which side you stay, be a worse punishment, right? It might be giving them the easy way out or infantilizing them in some way. But I think we should just make it strict, right? So if someone commits a murder, right, and we sentence them to life without we sentence them to 30 years and or 40 years or 50 years and they end up getting out, right, on good behavior or something like that, and then they go out and kill again, this person should be put to death. There are certain types of crimes that just when you get to a point that you have to just ask yourself, are we doing a disservice to the world by letting this person continue to exist even though they've lost their right to live, right?
I
So
don't. Oh, go
one of
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
sorry. So one of the issues is we keep conflating something like it may well be the case. I'm not entirely sure personally. It may well be the case if you commit a sufficiently egregious crime that you lose the right to live. Okay, but that doesn't mean that we ought kill the person. You're talking about like all of the negative things that are occurring here as a result of letting these people potentially live in prison for the rest of their life. I don't think that you've managed to demonstrate any of these problems significantly. But you're ignoring all of the other negative externalities of killing people. We don't need to talk about the monetary aspect. The actual impact of the on the people who are the family members of the person put to death is significant. Increased rates of PTSD, anxiety, etc., all fall into this category. A child of someone who was put to death by the use of the death penalty, who are they going to blame for the death of their parent? The answer is they blame the state. It breeds deep distrust in these people of the state, which actually increases criminal behavior in the long run. The actual advantages to the people who have to make the decision of whether or not they want their the person who perpetrated a crime against their family member, whether that person should be put to death, is also immense. These people have to make an incredible decision. And once that decision has been put into practice, they must question for the rest of their life whether that was the correct decision. These people, we don't raise people to make these decisions. And it's incredibly burdensome on these people as well. I think it's insane to think of this in a vacuum.
And if I may piggyback on that just really quick, and I know we're getting on time and things like that, but again, making it more stringent. If there were a hypothetical world, perhaps, where we could know 100% with all certainty that this person has, in all cases, done this, that there is zero chance, then maybe your argument might hold some weight with me. But I don't think we can ever live in that world.
So
I
what
think
about
that's
Ted Bundy?
fantasy land.
What about Ted Bundy?
Again, this is easy to see in retrospect, but I cannot imagine, right? And maybe you can help me out, but I cannot imagine a system, and especially with AI deepfakes and all this shit coming out, right? Where even if we have fucking video evidence of someone gunning down 20 kids, right? There will come a time where we cannot trust that to a sufficient degree to know 100% that it's certain. So
Yeah, there are
again,
always ways to tell when videos are edited
you
and
say this
been
as if that's always
touched.
going to be the case, and I don't think it will
I
be.
believe in our police force. You know, I believe in our detective work. I believe in the system. You know what I mean? So you guys seem to share a
I
common.
do
You guys,
too, but the
no, hold on,
system.
Let me say this. You guys seem to share a common like condemnation towards the system. Like the system never gets it right. Is the kind of vibe. Let me say
No,
vibe. This may not be
no.
what you're exactly saying, but that yes, there are going to be innocent people who are convicted of a crime that they are not guilty of in our system. We are obviously not perfect, but I have great faith in our system that we get it right more times than we get it wrong.
Well,
Right?
It
it's absolutely the case that we get it right more than we get it wrong. But that's not the concern. The concern is
cold
how are
comfort
we
for the
treating
times we
those
get it
who are.
wrong, right?
Yeah.
Cold comfort for
This
the
is
times
sort
we get
of.
it wrong.
I think we've been taking a fairly reasonable position. This would be like saying something like because vaccines sometimes don't inoculate you, and accepting that sometimes it doesn't inoculate you, that therefore we don't believe that vaccines are effective. This is just a specious argument. I don't think you've actually been listening to what we've been saying.
No, I really feel like I have been,
No, I
and
think you have. It's just, again, I just want to make it clear so that you can hear me. I do trust our system. Great thing one of our systems has is an appeals process. It has processes to recognize that that does make mistakes. That's one of the reasons I do believe in it. Our system was founded on the idea that it's better for 100 guilty men to go free than one free man to spend time in prison. And I generally agree with that sentiment. Again, I know we're getting low on time. I know we got things to do, and you want call-ins and things. But I'll just say this, right? The death penalty is a black mark upon our system because there is no chance of rectifying it when we know that sometimes we're going to get wrong. So even if 100 out of 101 times we got it right, that one time getting it wrong is enough to say, I think there are better ways. Because what do we want to happen here? We want the people who have done these horrible things to be removed from society. Death is not the only answer here. There are far better ones. That's my argument.
So I do want to add just a couple clarifiers, and then I'll like let everybody get a final word in, and then we'll open it to Collins if there's any interest in it. But a couple things that were mentioned earlier in the debate, and this is why I saved them for the end because I didn't want it to feel like I was joining either side here. Egg mentioned the potential for a person who is guilty to get off as a result of the appeals process. And I just want to clarify that, like, the way that we do this appeals process is for you to get off of a crime, to be fully exonerated, there needs to be some new DNA evidence that inexplicably like removes you from the pool of people who could have committed this crime. And if it's something to the effect of like you're innocent, but it's like say prosecutorial misconduct or whatever, these get kicked back to a new trial. And so then you have the potential to convict this person on all of the same evidence. It's just that you can't do X or Y shady thing. And then I do have a clarifying question for Feathery, which is one that within this appeals process, let's say that like somebody is sentenced by a jury of their peers, and you seem to be putting a lot of weight on the fact that it's a jury that is giving them this, is making this call. But also you add a lot of value to the appeals process in and of itself, and this is something that is done absent a jury. This is something that a jury is not there for. So I guess if you're willing to let it be overturned by people who aren't a jury, then how is it that you're able to put so much weight on the fact that a jury is making this decision to begin with?
So I would just to clarify, like I said before, the system that we have for the death penalty may not be perfect right now. I wouldn't argue that. I would argue that we do have a too big of a margin of error right now in terms of the people that we submit for the death sentence. Whether that's, we'll never be able to know if anybody ever commits a crime ever. I don't want to take that stance. I think we can absolutely discern whether or not people commit crimes. I think we've evolved, technologically speaking, to the point where it's very easy um, to prove most crimes, right? Because you leave evidence everywhere, especially in the digital age that we live in. It makes it easier to actually um, convict you of these crimes, in my opinion. I wouldn't say that that makes it more difficult. I think Wick, you talked about that for a moment, like in the coming ages as technology progresses. I think it would only make it easier to solve these crimes. The tracking data on your phone, for example, right? When you post a picture on your Instagram, 5 minutes away from where you committed a crime, or like anything that can lead an investigator to finding more evidence of you. There's countless cases of the technology of the criminal led to their demise. So yeah, and you guys talk about rectifying as well any wrong, like any thing that's happened to like an innocent person who's been sentenced, or who's been committed as guilty even though they were innocent, that we can somehow rectify this. I don't there's no way that we can rectify it. I don't We can give them all the money in the world and it wouldn't matter. The rectifying is out of the equation when it comes to that. There's no there's nothing we can do, and we can say that we can throw the money at them, and hope that it would change what the system did to them. Of course we're going to make mistakes, like I said, but that's why we just get more strict with this portion of the punishment. I'm not trying to say that, like I said, we're perfect, but there are things that we can do, to one, make sure that we're eliminating said monsters out of the world, and two, to make sure that we're putting less innocent people in that position.
I'd just like to appeal to the crowd about something that you just said. Um, Specifically, if I asked you, is there any amount of money that I could pay you to give up the next 10 years of your life, to spend it in a cell without talking to anyone, etc.? The answer is, for the vast majority of you, is going to be absolutely yes. There is an amount of money that I would accept for this amount. So
Yeah,
this
but you
idea that
wouldn't be put to
that
death in 10 years
we could
anyways.
never give this a given amount of
Death
money
penalty.
that is
Yeah,
going
but
to rectify this. For a lot of people, the answer is actually, well, no, there is an amount of money actually.
yeah, but the death penalty doesn't take 10 years to do, right? This is a process that takes many, many, many years. In fact, some of them go on for 15,
Yeah,
20
instead of
something
taking
years. So,
yeah, so instead of
yeah, I
taking
don't
10
know if I would
years of
take
your life, it takes
millions
the
of.
rest of your life. Does the death penalty? It takes all of your life. That money no longer means anything. We can't rectify the situation in any way, shape, or form. There is no chance.
Also, just to clarify Wick
Zero.
and Kami's position here, because and correct me if I'm wrong, but the it sort of seemed like the take that I was getting was more one where this might not be a thing that is ever able to be fully rectified, but at least there are steps that can be taken in that direction.
That's
Versus,
correct.
Yes.
okay, okay,
Like I have under no illusion that if you spend 10 years of your life in prison, that it's going to be made entirely correct through money, right? Or through fame, or through, I don't know, a book deal. I don't know, right? There's nothing that we can give to those people to fully compensate the lost time, the guilty thing, but we can soften the blow. Death is a permanent thing. There is nothing we can do. There's
So
nothing we can do to soften it. There's nothing we can do to make it better, even just a little. It's just done.
so we break their legs and give them a splint after.
As
I mean,
opposed
that
to
doesn't.
putting a bullet in their head, yes.
Yeah.
I think
Yes,
I'd
don't
just like to
compare
make.
me to the Almighty. Compare me to the alternative. We're
I'd
not
just
here
like to make.
comparing it to something where someone gets off and an innocent person is found not guilty and lives the rest of their life free. We're comparing it to a situation where someone's wrongfully convicted. So a wrong has already been done. The bad is already into the equation. The only question at this point is limiting and mitigating the damage. And my God, it's much easier to mitigate the damage when they're still alive.
I mean, I would just argue that there's no way that we could rectify a situation. And you guys use 10 years as the example,
Okay,
but
the next
death
time
sentence, 10.
someone wastes an hour of your time in a debate, right? I'm going to remind you of this, that you would have rather had a bullet in the head rather than waste because there's nothing they can give to
Hey,
you to give you
I
back your
think
hour
no.
of the life that they have taken. Come on.
Listen. This is not on the same scale whatsoever. We're, and especially when earlier in the debate where I'm talking about, making it more strict in terms of the most heinous out of the most heinous crimes, where we are 100% without a doubt with video evidence, DNA evidence, whatever the case may be, that proves that this person is guilty. Our system does get it right. And while there are cases, once again, that do go wrong, I think that they're through the appeal process that we already have. It makes it gives them quite a long period of time to find out whether they're innocent or not. And if they aren't found innocent within the time of their death penalty, which is usually, like I said, 15 to 20 something years, then effectively you've already done the irreparable damage regardless if you were to put them on life without parole.
Again, look, I'm a father. So if I was put in prison right now, okay, my family would continue to do its thing, right? If I was then executed, there's no chance that I'd ever be able to see my family and what happens with my family, etc. But if I get exonerated because I was innocent as an octogenarian, of course there's still value to the rest of my life. I get to see everything. I get to associate with, like, grandchildren, all of this sort of stuff. I get to associate with nephews and nieces and all of these things as well. There's absolutely still value even if you've been in prison for 50 years or whatever you may have.
I think. I don't hear the words that were mentioned earlier. Rather seeing innocent people be free, and I wonder who you think had this conception when we conceived of our justice system. But I think when you start to think about it in the more exact terms that we're speaking about, I would not rather see 100 pedophiles who are guilty go free than one who is innocent die. I would not rather 100 uh, serial murderers who are guilty go free than one who is innocent and not die.
It's
I
called
would
Blackstone's
not.
ratio, by the
What's
way.
that?
The concept is called Blackstone's ratio, and it was written by William Blackstone, an English jurist
Uh-huh.
in the 1760s.
Uh-huh.
A modicum of research would have told you that. Wikipedia.
That's nice.
Just so I would.
I don't need any research to tell me that 10 times out of 10, if I catch a rapist, he's dying. I don't need any research to tell me that 10 times out of 10, if I catch a pedophile, he's dying. I don't need
The
any
unfortunate
research to tell me
position
that.
of unfortunate position of Eggusan is
Oh,
he
just real
believes that
quick.
we
Just
can
real quick.
justify
Well,
positions
let
without
Kamika.
research.
Hold on. Like, again, if you catch someone you think is a rapist, if you catch someone you
Oh,
think
I
is
specified
a
just now,
pedophile.
if I catch them doing it, right, and I witness it, that is the proper justice, that they die. I do not see a reason to stop acting as though that is the correct
Sorry,
way to
bro. I
deal with
thought you
that.
were a pedophile. I thought she was 17. Turns out she was 19. Oopsie whoopsie, my
Yeah, but
bad.
that would clearly have been proven in court.
Well,
So,
Your
Well, no, there's
bro
no
here
proving you
just said he
caught if you
caught
just
him in the
shoot
act.
them
He comes in,
extrajudicially.
someone
come on,
looks
but
a little
I
too
think
young. He
he's
pulls out
talking.
the guns. Starts
17's
blasting away. Bow, bow,
17's
bow,
still
bow, bow.
illegal if
Right? And
he's
it's like,
No, I
look,
think
here's
if
stuff
he's
going
older
on.
than whatever.
I don't want to speak
What's
for him,
Romeo
but
and
let's
Juliet
take it.
lost? Like
Let's
3
take
years?
it in good faith. At least I want to take it in
So if
good
he's
faith and
21
say
or
that
older.
he wants to put him to death, right? I think that it would be easily
He
proven
said
in
no.
court.
He just said we were
I
just
know.
shooting. He said he
I know
killed
what
him
he
on the
said.
spot.
I mean,
He
look,
said that
If I
earlier on the
catch someone
spot. He said,
raping a
dude, it's
child, they
15 years
die.
old.
the
Period.
conversation
just to
of
be clear, you mean by your
extrajudicial
hands,
killings
not
isn't up to.
Yeah.
okay.
No, I'm not asking
Isn't up
anyone
for
to do it for
discussion.
me.
This is insane, though.
No, but I think that lends credence to the fact that everyone has a line, right? Everyone has a line in themselves where they say that this crosses my boundary of what I believe people should have the right to live, right? And it doesn't matter where that line's going to vary from person to person. Obviously, some person's line might be a little bit higher, some person's line might be a little bit lower, but that line existing at all lends credence to the fact that the death penalty is something that we should allow.
Okay, I want to let everybody go through their closings. We don't have the meat of this can continue on, but I will start dragging some people in to kind of prod a bit with Collins or whatever. So we'll go in the same order we went last time. Egg, if you want to go ahead and give closing thoughts, then Chicken, then Feathery, then Wick.
Yeah, I mean, my sort of statement just now is my closing thoughts. I think if I were to witness a crime of a certain level of awfulness, uh, of horror, um, I don't particularly care for anybody else's input or the input of the person perpetrating the crime. I care very much about getting immediate and swift justice for it. Um, and if that is something that anybody in the world relates to, if you've ever been a victim of a horrendous crime, you would have rather killed that person than be a victim of it. If that is at all a motive for you in your life, then that is the actual epitome, that is the acme of justice for you. And if you accept anything less, if you accept that 100 of these people who do the bad thing, that for you, the acme of success in justice is death for that person, and you let 100 of them go free, you are not living up to your own standard. That is all.
Okay, Chicken.
Look, when it comes to, I suppose, when it comes to extrajudicial killings, regardless of the severity of the crime, I think that's wild. We can't possibly live in a situation where we go and just like summarily execute people we think have committed crimes. There's a reason why we have a judicial system. Um, I think the unfortunate thing here is we've sort of gone through very few of the arguments. There's been no real defense of whether or not there is a deterrent effect that happens when we put people to death. I think this is because there really is no defense of that position. All we've had is continued sort of like moral brigading, saying that we ought to kill these people, even though the argument that has been made continually is that people who make do sufficiently bad crimes give up the right to life. That does not mean that we ought kill those people. It just means that it's something that is on the table. So even if we just grant all of the statements made, I obviously wouldn't, to the opposition, they haven't made the argument that we ought to do the death penalty. I have pointed to a whole bunch of negative effects that the death penalty brings along, and I think it's been very clearly shown here that there's no real positive effect of implementing the death penalty.
Feathery.
Yeah, so I think that to summarize my position why I'm pro death penalty is because I have faith in our system. I think that yes, while we do get it wrong, it's a very slim margin of error that we have, that we can lower through the development of more technology, and through the betterment of our judicial systems and our laws and regulations that we already have. I think that we can obviously restrain who gets sentenced to death. We can make it more strict. So for some of the most heinous individuals, for example, Ted Bundy, and I believe that we can see if people are guilty without a shadow of a doubt. And maybe I don't agree with everything that Eggusan has said today, but me and him do take a similar position that we think that the death penalty is, something that we should have. I do also agree that this is the only just response to some of these heinous acts that we can think of, right? And some of these heinous actors. I don't think that there are people, not everyone can be reformed. And I also don't believe that the financial aspect of it being more expensive, which it is because of the appeals process, that it takes anything into consideration because one, you've never the average day citizen has never been affected by the death penalty's cost in their day-to-day life, right? The average taxpayer citizen. And two, because this is not something that is should be weighed monetarily. This is something that we should be looking at morally. And I don't think that whether or not it deters is the reason why, sole reason why we are uh, uh, actually using the death penalty. I don't think deterrence is the only reason. While it may be a deterrent, right? Like, so I don't want, yes, you're right. There are heinous actors who are going to act regardless of the punishment, right? But there may have been more. We can't tell, right? So any study that would say that the death penalty doesn't act as a deterrence would simply not, to me, not hold any water because you simply cannot tell what crimes they have prevented for it being there.
Okay, and then last but not least, Wick.
You're right. It's not about deterrence. It's not about money. These things shouldn't factor into the equation when we talk about this policy. What we should talk about is justice and how the injustice of getting it wrong compounds a situation where someone has already lost their life or the lives of their loved ones. We often, I think we have illustrated this on this panel, we mistake vengeance for justice. And that's not what this is. If we as a society want to be a better society, one that has less um, bloodlust, less um, blood on our hands, we need to abolish the death penalty. Not only have we gotten it wrong over and over and over again, but we have a situation where, in many cases, the victims or the families of the victims do not want to see this person killed. And yes, victims' statements are taken into account, but they don't get to decide the sentence. Wisely so in most cases. What is justice? It is not vengeance. And while, yes, I think my opponents are right to want to remove these people from society, I think it is far better to simply keep them incarcerated, living out their lives, safe from, or where society is safe from them. We have no reason to kill these people if we have already incarcerated them. More war was mentioned briefly, different situation. The the top priority is to stop the current crime. That's why I think police using lethal force to stop someone who's trying to get away, that's fair. But when we already have them, when they're already in custody, when we already have secured them, I think it just compounds the error in the morality to execute them, especially when we have so many cases where the system has failed us, failed its victims, and created new victims. Thank you. Gang, if you like what I have to say, if you enjoy me, and if you don't know who I am, check me out. You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/@wick-tv. The dash is important. It should be good. We have some great shows coming up next week. We're going to talk about some D&D, Wizards of the Coast. We're also going to talk about the Trump trials with Rob Noor, Josiah from Pondering Politics, and more. Should be fun. That's me. Bye.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to start pulling people in. Real quick, I do appreciate everybody for coming on. It was relatively easy to set this up, and everybody was here on time, so much appreciated. We'll start with Parallax. It looks like he might have pushback for both sides in the chat. I'm not exactly sure where he falls on this, so we'll start with Parallax. Good sir.
Hi there.
What's up, buddy?
How are you?
I'm good. It seemed like you had, I just mentioned, it seemed like you had pushback for sort of both sides depending on the point of argumentation. So I guess wherever you would like to start with kind of prodding.
Yeah. So I think that the death penalty as it currently exists, and Wick and Kamikaze have pointed out quite a few of the issues with it as it currently exists. I feel as though, first of all, we have largely proven it is not a great deterrent. In fact, the studies show that it is no more a deterrent than a life sentence. So if your argument is deterrence, you're dead in the water. However, I do think that if evidence is above a certain threshold and the crime is heinous enough, that for me, the moral justification is there. I think, for example, who comes to mind for me is Adam Lanza. Wick, my biggest what the fuck take from you was the AI video. We can't even believe video evidence shit. I believe the
Not
videos.
yet, but there will be coming in time.
I don't think we'll get there.
Well,
But
let
I
me
think
push back
that
on this. Hold on, let me push back on this a bit. Again, so I remember, right, because I'm old, right? I remember the time before social media, and I remember what we had in mind when it came to the opening up of knowledge to all and sundry. The internet was going to be a golden age where we were all more educated, where everyone was able to have information at their fingertips that they would be able to come to the truth. That obviously did not happen. This advent in technology only led to widespread confusion and the ability to manipulate facts in such a way to support whatever fucking cause you wanted. So again, I think you are underestimating the dangers of deepfakes, the dangers of the again, it's actually pretty scary. The leapfrogs in advancement that AI has been making in the last few years. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we'll be there in 5 years, but give it 10, give it 20.
So
yeah.
we reevaluate the death sentence then. But for now,
Yeah, I'm actually entirely for that, Feathery. That's a great transition. Wick, I actually think technology was the biggest weakness in your arguments. In that, as technology has advanced, as DNA evidence has advanced, yeah, we have found out that people we convicted in the 70s and 80s were exonerated. However, that's a double-edged sword. That means that people who are being convicted now, the threshold for evidence is higher, both for prosecutors and for murderers. You've got a slimmer margin for error if you are going to commit crime, and you've got a slimmer margin for error if you are trying to convict someone of a crime. So it would stand to reason for me that intuitively speaking, if you've got DNA evidence, if you've got everything needed, you've pretty much got a rock solid conviction there.
Which states require DNA evidence to sentence to death?
I did not say I stand for, and in fact, I opened by saying that as it exists, it's problematic. I do not stand for it as it currently exists. I'm okay
Same.
with the death penalty.
correct. Yep,
I think
same
that
here.
there are absolutely things that need to be changed about how it's implemented. One of the things I mentioned in chat is that I think that, for example, if the Adam Lanzas of the world, if you commit a crime where there is video evidence, you commit, double digit numbers of people, there are also eyewitnesses, you leave evidence, you admit it was you. I fuck the appeals process. Just seriously, fuck the appeals process. I don't care anything about that guy. Get him out of here. Take him behind the barn and be
Why
done with it.
waste $500,000?
So Para, I
Why
don't.
waste $500,000 of my dollars?
Para, I'm not sure that you believe this. So like, what if, for example, you the reason why I think that the appeals process should stay, even in the face of presented evidence by the prosecution, what if you have a situation where that the evidence is arguably planted, like for example, maybe in like a blue RAV4 on somebody's like junkyard.
So again, this is not the kind that wouldn't meet my threshold. That's a very
How does it
smart
not?
pick. That's a very smart pick. So part of my threshold is like witnesses and video evidence, right? Like we have to be able to see you flat out fucking commit the crime. I don't think it's just as simple as DNA, because there are things that can be done regarding DNA. DNA can be planted. DNA can be moved. DNA can be in places you wouldn't think it would be for
And
reasons you
witnesses
would.
can be intimidated. We've had people confess to crimes that later it finds out that they did not do because they were pressured by police, right? Do you think it's very hard to convince a bunch of people who've just had a traumatic experience, right? Who saw someone gun down a bunch of people to kind of edge them and nudge them in a way to say, you know what? You probably saw this guy, right? It was probably him,
Even
huh?
next.
This
Yes,
is the
yes,
distrust in the
yes.
system.
I absolutely think. I think that was a tragic car wreck of a question. Yes, I think that it is extremely difficult to convince a bunch of teachers and principals and the surviving children. Yeah, that's the guy who killed your friends when they fucking saw the actual guy. Yes.
It's not so
So-
much about convincing them. Like, it seems like when we elicit false confessions, this doesn't come as a result of like it's more of an issue of like trapping them, right? It's one where like the way out of this, and like the way out of this issue is to eventually confess to the thing, because it feels like the cops are going to keep you there until you give them what they want to hear.
And they bring
Yeah,
their
the police
they bring their
coercion thing.
dog into
But
it.
again,
They say
yeah,
goodbye to Frisky.
that was fucking wild, bro. That was fucking wild. That's out of pocket. Again, this is not in my world
The problem is,
where
in
I'm
your
deciding
world,
what
it's a
the
fantasy
parameters to the death
extended
penalty.
universe of parallax here, right? Like, there is no way we can craft a systemic way to meet all your standards. It's impossible.
You absolutely
We
could.
That's
cannot
not
do
true.
it.
That's
Not
not
You
to
true.
a
absolutely
Do
level
we
of
even
degree
meet
where
our
you
own
have
standards?
0% error.
Do we
I'm not
even
looking
meet
for
our
0%.
standards?
I
I'm
am.
cool with one.
I know.
Yeah.
I
you're
know you
cool with
are.
one.
Yeah,
I
but
know
the
you
system
are.
our system will never
I'm
have
not
a
here to.
0% chance of proving everyone the
And
correct way.
thus, we should get rid of
And
permanent solutions to these problems, such as
I would
the death
argue that
penalty.
all the solutions that we have are permanent, right? So if you convict someone of killing 7 people and they're a serial killer and you sentence them to death and you have all this evidence and it takes them 15, 20 years to figure out whether or not they were innocent or not through the appeals process, you will never, that's irreparable damage. Once
That is
again,
way okay. That's a terrible thing to have happen to them. It's still better than a
but you're
bullet.
talking about irreparable damage. So I'm telling you that regardless of whether or not you kill this person, irreparable damage has been occurred. And yes, it would be worse if we put an innocent person to death, but I don't think that exceptions should make the rule, correct? So the margin of error here
Exceptions
is
should
so
inform how we go about and do things.
correct,
Absolutely.
which is why we should improve our system, which is why we should improve and once again change the way in which we qualify people for the death sentence. I think that once again it should be reserved for the most heinous actors on our planet, right? And
Yeah.
yes, there will
Look,
be
one of the
for-
issues here, just to be very clear, is we keep hearing we should improve the system, we should do all of this. I just haven't heard any actual, like, genuine policy prescriptions on how we're going to do this. What
I
is it that we're going to
absolutely
do
gave
to
some.
sort of increase this?
yeah,
And
better
in such a way that's not going to like burden and slow down the process even more.
no,
I don't know how you're doing this.
I also gave
But
evidence for this.
just sorry, just before that, I did hear in what you were saying something that I disagree with Parallax, just on a technical point. You can't. We haven't disproven a deterrent effect. That's not how this research works. Generally, what happens is we have statistical analysis, and we effectively forward a hypothesis. So we say, look, execution has a deterrent effect. If we fail to prove that, we just affirm the null hypothesis, which is it doesn't, which is what we've seen time and time again. We actually do have, you had a bit of a contention with us, sort of, we implement a policy and then we don't see what actually happens after that policy. We actually do have statistical tools to help find out effectively what those other situations would have been. So we go and take information from comparable counties, and we basically make like a Frankenstein's algorithm that follows the trend of like murders in a county, and then we see what happens after we stop putting people to death. And we've done these analyses, and the ones that have been done thus far, past 2012, haven't shown any deterrent effect.
Yeah, I think you misheard me. I said that. I said that
Cool.
the evidence shows that there is no greater a deterrent effect than life imprisonment. So if your argument is for deterrence, you're arguing
Sorry,
in to spite your face. You're not. It's not a good argument.
Sorry, I know that there's a very small difference between this. So we don't prove that there is no greater. That's not how it works. It's just we affirm the null hypothesis.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry,
So
this is a very fine point.
So-
semantics are a blast, but either way, the point
Isn't
is,
a semantic difference.
it is.
No, it isn't.
Either way, I am agreeing with you that deterrence is not a good reason.
Yeah.
So appreciate your support.
Blue on blue.
Yeah, and I would also
action here.
disagree that we haven't provided any evidence that we haven't thought of other ways and other alternatives to improve this system, because I think I've been saying this pretty clearly throughout the debate that I do need a bigger threshold of evidence to confirm that death penalty for me. I need it to be more strict. I'm not comfortable with the way it is. I think that in undeniable evidence, and I think Parallax touched on this a little bit, undeniable evidence would be an example, right? We have video evidence of you. We have DNA evidence inside the victim, right? We have your DNA underneath their fingernails. You have you have a scratch mark on your face, right? You know what I mean? Like,
You
there are
wrote a
certain
manifesto.
you wrote a manifesto, right? There are absolutely ways that we can prove people without a shadow of a doubt, and I think that the option for a death penalty should be on the table for the jury to decide.
R-
Go ahead.
Real quick before it spirals away, I just want to stand out and make it clear that I don't agree with just 8 ounces of lead, and I certainly don't agree with myself being judge, jury, and executioner in this case. Now, that being said, I can see a world where I walk in and the right person I care about is having the wrong thing done to them, and in the moment I do something. However, the reply to that in the conversation was actually relatively incorrect. In most cases, it's usually parents of children being sexually assaulted when these crimes are committed, because it is a crime to take that person's life. These men are often either not charged or found not guilty. Rarely, if ever, does someone receive some kind of punitive result from acting when they catch someone in the act of assaulting their child or
Strange
spouse.
how a jury of my peers agrees with my position, essentially.
Yeah, but your jury of your peers aren't the people who make the laws, right?
They
And
are.
I would
They
say that
are.
we should take the value of the jury of our peers, right? Because if their general pick of the population says that the crimes you committed are heinous, and the prosecution presented uh, the evidence towards that claim, where it's undeniable to the point, like I said, where there is a justification for having the death penalty as one of the punishments, then yes, I think that.
I have this scenario in my head where you got this egg guy, right? He's going in, he sees something heinous, and he pops one into some dude, right? He's doing some shit, and then Parallax walks in right after, and all he sees is his friend got shot by this dude. He didn't know what happened, and so Parallax pops egg, and then I walk in and I see Parallax and 2 dead bodies. I'm like, "What have you done, son? What have you done?" Right?
Wait a minute, I'm not for being the one to pull the trigger. What are you talking about? No.
Neither am I. Neither am I.
No,
Well,
I'm
I
not
think
for
he's pushing
that.
that. I think he's pushing that back onto Egg, not to you.
Yeah.
I do want to ask though, Para, just to be perfectly clear, because you said that you're fine with a 1% failure rate.
Yep.
It says so. It seems like if we're to assume that the numbers that maybe put in chat earlier are accurate, it looks like it's about it's 8,957. The amount of death penalties since 73. So I guess you're fine with this being 89, 90 people innocently put to death.
Yep, I would. I would be perfectly fine with that, because at the end of the day, if I assume that for every one, and I think this is a fair assumption, for every one innocent person put to death, there is one person on the streets killing. It's really easy for me to get there, because
None of these
no
people
innocent
innocent or
person,
guilty are on the street killing anyone.
no innocent person, whether on the streets or in prison, is killing anyone, but a guilty person who is not prosecuted could be.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess
So-
the pushback would be like, why the fuck should I mean, I guess I understand like sort of the utilitarian balancing act that you're arguing in favor of, but like, I just I don't understand how you can justify like an innocent person dying, like on behalf of there being some other not innocent person out there.
Because remember, the alternative here isn't that these people get released onto the street. The alternative is that we have one innocent person and 100 guilty people in prison for the rest of their life, with potentially the possibility that new evidence comes up for that one innocent person that exonerates them and lets them out. This is the alternative. We keep acting like the alternative is just let all the murderers free.
No,
Yeah, I don't. That's definitely not the alternative. Yeah, no, I think that again, I don't think that with the increase in technology, the same things that are exonerating these guys, we are going to see. I think we're going to see a significant decrease in this. I also think we'll see an increase in guys on death row being exonerated. I would have to see what the numbers look like with modern technology. Obviously, when we're looking
Sure.
since 1973, we're going to be dealing with numbers that don't include that evidence. And
Yeah. If we're prognosticating, though, I don't see the death penalty surviving in America, at least in the Western society. I just don't. If
I would
we're
disagree with that.
prognosticating.
So
I
real,
would
real,
disagree with that. I think
at
that
least we
there's
know we've got Egg to enforce it.
real,
No,
real
I would
quick.
I
disagree with that.
volunteer to
There's
be an
always gonna
executioner.
there's always going to
Absolutely
be
would.
people who agree with that sort of sentiment, and that sort of sentiment is going to carry over to the political figures that they elect into office. And you'll still see some areas, because we live in a place where every state can kind of decide on their own. You're still going to see the death penalty in places, unless we federally ban it and then we take that control away from the state, which I don't think we would do. But
Well, it's happened
Um,
before.
just real quick, Para, is there anything else that you wanted to get out there? Otherwise, I'm going to move on to Bambi, and then we're going to start winding down.
No, appreciate you for having me on. Great first show, and I think that most of you did a great job advocating for yourselves.
Cool. Thank you for
Thank you,
coming
man.
on.
Thank you very
Absolutely,
much.
brother.
Us
Yeah, I just
name
want
the
to add real quick
failures,
that
but
no, I just want to add real quick that
Um,
I agree. I think that this was a super productive conversation. I enjoyed talking to you, Wick. I enjoyed always talking to you, Chicken. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that we got to get some of these ideas out, and hopefully, people heard out my side, and hopefully people heard your side. And I think that a lot of the more conversations involving serious moral decisions that our country makes on a daily basis is good to have. So yeah.
real quick, Wick said, "Name the failures." Egg, I'll execute him on the spot thing is crazy. Wick, you are a man child about cake. Goodbye.
What?
I don't know what
Oh,
the thing about
throwback.
cake was, but
Oh,
Okay, Bambi. Whenever you want to,
okay.
interject.
So I hope it's okay to ask you guys not to interject until I get my thought out, because I get a bit speech dyslexic, I guess. But so there's one thing that I was just wondering, more so for the people who are for the death penalty, but obviously, like, we can Kamikaze, you guys can interject too. But I noticed that none of you guys actually touched base on this. So in terms of there seems to be a very high correlation in terms of like people who are of lower social economic backgrounds, so obviously that have gone through death penalties, right? And that's not like whether they're innocent or not, it's just the fact that they've actually been sentenced to death. So I was just wondering, like, because obviously those people would be supplied with things like legal aid, whereas like somebody who's a little bit more wealthy would have access to lawyers and legal representation that is of higher value, which could potentially get them off, or even potentially like skew the results of the legal system, because there have been cases where there have been biased situations where people have been paid off. And I was just wondering what your thoughts on that were, because obviously that would be an unfair stigma against those people who are being put sentenced to death. But
You,
yeah.
you're absolutely right. There are times and cases where people have a lot of influence and money, where they're able to get really fancy lawyers and really fancy suits to basically pick apart every I and T that a prosecutor brings to the table, which would obviously leave the lower class into a disadvantage. But I would say that that disadvantage stretches throughout all the lower class. It's not solely here, and we don't take the disadvantages of the lower class into account when we talk about any terms of other punishments that we inflict on these people. It's not like their aid isn't good enough when they're getting life without parole, right? So um, I would just push back on that a little bit and say that in that case it's really, not to say that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't play as heavy as a role as you think into whether or not we should keep the death penalty.
What about yourself, Egg? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Hey, now.
I brought up the first part actually earlier in the panel. I did bring up the first part talking about how most of the people who we sentence to not only death penalties but life sentences actually, and it's a very high percentage of the people we convict for murder as well do not have what we would consider valuable skills as human beings. They do not have college educations. They do not have things like this. Most of them are people without college educations, and a whole lot of them are people without even high school educations. Um, so, I mean, and that had to do with a different point earlier, um, about extracting value from these individuals, which I don't think plays into consideration as to the justice, as to the moral justice of them being killed for their actions. Um, but definitely plays into a pragmatic argument, when deciding how you might want to go about interacting with these individuals.
Yeah, wait, can you repeat that last part?
That I don't think it implies any moral worth. I'll boil it down a little bit. I don't think it implies any moral worth that these people are less educated or have less money,
But
but
it would
I
just
can
think
play
I
into
think you're
a pragmatic argument about how we should interact with these people.
I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I think it's not about whether or not they're morally valuable or whatnot. It's more about the fact that there should be equal opportunity between all these cases when it comes to the fact that somebody's going to live or die.
And
Is more what I was thinking, not like whether or not that person's education or anything like that would
yep, then
contribute to the value.
You're
You
not
know what I mean?
trusting the system, yeah, but then you're not trusting the system at that point. Yes, there are going to be better lawyers than others, but then we don't. Even if you're putting them with life without parole, like you don't assign them a better lawyer because they're on life without parole. You get the same public defender if you're only getting a public defender. I mean, this is why I don't think it matters as much as you think. Is because even if you were to take life without parole, for example, you're still getting that same public defender who's still representing you the same in the same effectiveness as he would for the death penalty.
I
So
also
something
think
that's
generally.
sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. I already spoke.
Something that's important to recognize is that in any judicial system, it seems that bias on the basis of immutable characteristics and otherwise are going to be present, whether or not it's whether they're rich or poor. Obviously, that's not so immutable. But we can have a look at cases like the Rodney King case, where we have video evidence that gets interpreted entirely differently by a jury that's entirely white than a jury that may well have been, some other race. In fact, it's the case in the specific case that I'm talking about. It was seen that the hand that was held up in defense was actually a threat to the police who beat Rodney King by the jury. It's incredibly important to recognize that any system that we have will have these biases. It's the unfortunate state of the world. That doesn't mean that I don't trust the judicial system, of course. It just means that we have to be incredibly aware of these things. And it is the case that in such a system where people are being treated differently on the basis of immutable characteristics, is that those who are already downtrodden in society are going to get the brunt of any bad side of the deal. It's probably going to be the case that people who are black are probably going to be more likely to be killed innocently than people who are white.
All I was going to add was, I suspect that given the severe nature of the crimes that we bring before, the appeals process and so on of the death penalty, I think that it is a very hard position, even for the best lawyers in the world, to be able to convince a jury, regardless of evidence, right? So I suspect the quality of lawyer, um, at that level is probably not highly effective.
Okay.
I just refer to the O.J. Simpson case.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the, I mean, I think that like, especially on the high end, you probably do have a potential for clearly juries, because these are people, they're not like infallible. They can be swayed in a direction or another. One of the things that Para brought up, it was interesting that he brought up the Adam Lanza case, because not so much as it pertains to the trial, but as it pertains to just people involved in trials like this. One of the most pervasive things that Alex Jones did was it seems like he like minorly edited a video of one of the of Anderson Cooper and I believe a parent, where it like looks like his face sort of glitches out or whatever. This was convincing enough to convince people that this had been done in front of a green screen. And so I think that there probably is the prevalence for video evidence and things like that to be misconstrued. And if I think that this is like potentially problematic in both directions. It seems like prosecutors could take altered video evidence and present it as theory just as easily as it seems like defense attorneys could sway in the direction that like they could effectively manufacture reasonable doubt. And I think that that's an always prevalent worry in our judicial system. Before let's see, Bambi, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Just like, I guess, thank you guys for having me, and I appreciate that you guys didn't interject before I spoke over. Unless, like, did Wick actually say anything on that, or did you want to?
I don't
do you-
know if it's relevant to my view on this, honestly.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Like, I
Sure.
just had that thought while.
No,
Yeah.
it's a good thought, but yeah, I don't know if it's relevant to my view. So,
Yeah, cool. Easy. Well, thank you guys for having me. You guys are all doing great. Also, I feel like it's been really good that you guys aren't like insulting each other and all that like other debates. So go, you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is
Okay.
really productive. Thank you for coming on.
That's okay. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Yep. All right. Is there anything else anybody else feels that they need to get out there, or are we good to wind this down?
I'm good. I think we've all clearly articulated our views, and at least I believe that. I don't want to speak for you guys. I've clearly articulated how I feel, and I think that you guys both kind of understand where I'm coming from. And yeah, I mean, I look forward to having future conversations if the invitation is there.
Yeah, awesome, absolutely. Well, thank everybody for coming on. I appreciate all of you. I hope that I didn't overstep as a moderator at any point. You guys were relatively. I don't really feel like I had to do a whole lot of moderation. Everybody here was pretty much cordial with one another. So I appreciate that. And yeah, thank you guys for coming on. So we'll
Absolutely.
go ahead and
Thank you very much.
transition out.
I appreciate you guys.